Ambassador Zexthara stepped off his ship onto Luna Station. His green scales caught the artificial light as he looked around with cold yellow eyes. The Veltronian diplomat had traveled far from his home world to meet these strange creatures. Called humans, to him, this was just another routine job. Meet the primitives, set up trade deals, make sure they knew their place in the galaxy. Commander Jake Sullivan waited at the docking bay. He wore the blue uniform of the Earth Defense Force and had a friendly smile on his face. Next to him stood Dr. Kate Morrison, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She worked as a cultural liaison, helping aliens understand human ways. "Welcome to Luna Station, Ambassador," Jake said, extending his hand. "I'm Commander Sullivan, and this is Dr. Morrison." Zexthara stared at the offered hand. On his world, touching strangers was forbidden. Only family members or superiors could make physical contact. But something about Jake's open expression made him hesitate. After a moment, he reached out with his clawed hand and briefly touched Jake's palm. "I am Ambassador Zexthara of the Veltronian Empire," he said in perfect English, though his voice sounded flat and emotionless. "I am here to establish proper relations between your species and the Galactic Council." Dr. Morrison smiled warmly. "We're honored to have you here. Would you like to rest first, or shall we begin the tour?" The reptilian alien found this question strange. In galactic diplomacy, schedules were fixed. No one asked what the diplomat wanted. "The tour will be acceptable," he replied as they walked. Through the station, Jake pointed out different areas. "That's our medical bay. Dr. Williams runs it. She's helped save over 1,000 lives in the past year." "Why does this matter?" Zexthara asked. "Surely you have enough humans to replace the lost ones." Jake stopped walking and looked at the ambassador with surprise. "Each life matters to us. Every person has value." This concept confused Zexthara. On Veltron Prime, individuals only mattered based on their rank and usefulness to the Empire. The idea that a low-ranking person could be worth saving seemed wasteful. They continued to the observation deck, where Earth hung like a blue marble in space. Dr. Morrison stood beside Zexthara as he looked at the planet below. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said softly. Zexthara examined the planet with his analytical mind. "The water content is high. The cloud cover suggests frequent weather changes. It appears to be a standard Class M world." "That's one way to see it," Dr. Morrison replied. "But for us, it's home. It's where our children play, where our families live, where we've built everything we care about." The ambassador tilted his head. The emotion in her voice was puzzling. Veltronians were taught to suppress such feelings from childhood. Attachment to places or people was considered a weakness. Over the next few days, Zexthara met more humans. Each encounter left him more confused than the last. Captain Lisa Park took him to see the Marine training grounds. She was a small woman with short brown hair and fierce green eyes. As they watched the soldiers practice, she explained their code. "Of honor, we have a saying," Lisa said. "No one left behind. It means we never abandon our people, no matter the cost. Even if saving one person risks many others?" Zexthara asked. "Especially then," Lisa replied firmly. "The moment we decide some lives matter less than others, we stop being human." Later, Ben Hayes, a teacher from Earth, showed Zexthara around a school via video link. The ambassador watched. Children asking questions, challenging their teacher's statements, and expressing wild ideas without fear. "Do you not punish them for questioning authority?" Zexthara asked. Ben laughed. "We encourage it. How else will they learn to think for themselves? Our job isn't to create obedient followers, but independent thinkers." This shocked the Veltronian. In his society, questioning superiors meant punishment or death. The idea of teaching children to challenge authority seemed like madness. The most disturbing encounter came when he met Maria Santos, an artist who painted pictures that served no practical purpose. She showed him paintings of sunsets, portraits, of ordinary people, and abstract designs that meant nothing to his logical mind. "Why do you waste time on this?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. Maria smiled as she continued painting. "Because it brings joy. Because it helps people feel connected to something beautiful. Because sometimes the soul needs feeding too." "The soul?" Zistara repeated the unfamiliar word. "The part of us that dreams, that hopes, that loves," Maria explained. "The part that makes us more than just thinking machines." As weeks passed, something strange began happening to Zexthara. He found himself looking forward to his daily conversations with Kate Morrison. When Jake told him jokes, the ambassador's mouth would twitch in what might have been the beginning of a smile. When he saw footage of humans helping each other during disasters, he felt an odd warmth in his chest. One evening, while watching a human movie with Dr. Morrison, Zexthara made a sound he had never made before. He laughed. The sudden burst of noise surprised him so much that he clamped his hands over his mouth. "It's okay," Kate said gently. "Laughter is natural. It means you're happy." "Veltronians do not experience happiness," Zexthara said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe Veltronians do," Kate replied. "Maybe they just forgot how." The final change came during his last week on Luna Station. A section of the station lost power, trapping several workers in a damaged area. Without hesitation, Jake and his team rushed to help, risking their own safety to save strangers. Zexthara watched from the command center as Jake crawled through dangerous wreckage to reach an injured maintenance worker. The commander could have sent someone else. He could have waited for safer options. Instead, he chose to risk himself for another person. When Jake emerged carrying the wounded worker, Zexthara felt something he had never experienced before. His eyes became wet with what humans called tears. His chest felt tight with an emotion he later learned was called pride, not in himself, but in these remarkable creatures who valued each life above their own safety dot. As his time on Luna Station ended, Zexthara knew he would never be the same. The cold certainty that had guided his life was gone, replaced by something warmer but more complicated. He understood now why humans confused the galaxy. They didn't follow logical patterns. They made choices based on things that couldn't be measured or calculated. When he returned to Veltron Prime, the High Council expected his usual efficient report. Instead, Zexthara stood before them and said words that would change everything. "The humans are not primitives to be managed," he declared. "They are teachers we should learn from. They have discovered something we lost long ago, how to be truly alive." The council chambers fell silent. Ambassador Zexthara had returned from Earth, but he was no longer the same Veltronian who had left. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. 3 months had passed since Ambassador Zexthara's return, and his behavior continued to worry them. The once reliable Veltronian now spoke of individual worth and emotional truth. He had even refused direct orders from his superiors, claiming they were morally wrong. Council leader Vashtar, a tall gray being with no visible emotions, addressed the assembly. "We must determine if the human contamination can spread. 3 new ambassadors will go to Earth. This time, we choose beings immune to their psychological tricks." The first choice was Unit 7742, a drone from the Collective. The Collective was a hive mind where millions of beings shared one consciousness. Individual thoughts were impossible. One drone thinking alone was like trying to separate a single drop from an ocean. The second was Quinder, an Arcturian philosopher. His people lived by pure logic. They had removed all emotions from their society centuries ago. To them, feelings were mental illness to be cured. The third was Greshnock, a Korthok warrior. His species respected only strength and victory. They saw kindness as weakness and helping others as stupidity. If anyone could resist human influence, it would be him. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Brooks waited at Luna Station as the three ships arrived. Beside him stood Diplomat Sarah White, a cheerful woman with red hair and freckles. Dr. Alex Turner, an anthropologist with thick glasses and endless curiosity, completed their welcoming team. "Remember," Sarah whispered to Ryan, "treat them like guests, not test subjects." The three aliens emerged from their ships simultaneously. Unit 7742 moved with mechanical precision, its gray metallic body showing no personality. Quinder walked with calculated steps, his tall blue frame radiating cold intelligence. Greshnock stomped forward, his muscular red form bristling with weapons and scars. "Welcome to Luna Station," Ryan said warmly. "We're glad you're here." Unit 7742 spoke in a flat, emotionless voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We acknowledge your greeting. We are here to observe and catalog human behavior for the collective." Quinder adjusted his flowing robes. "I seek to understand the logical errors in human thinking that caused Ambassador Zex Thara's malfunction." Greshnock just grunted. "Show me your warriors. I want to see what makes you think you're strong." Dr. Turner stepped forward with enthusiasm. "We've prepared a comprehensive tour of human culture. You'll get to see how we live, work, and play." "Play?" Quinder asked, his voice filled with confusion. "What logical purpose does play serve?" Sarah laughed. "That's exactly what makes it wonderful. Come on, let me show you." Over the following days, each alien began their observations. The humans treated them with the same warmth they had shown Zex Thara, but this time they faced beings supposedly immune to their influence. Unit 7742 followed Dr. Turner through the station's residential areas. The drone observed families eating together, children laughing with their parents, and couples holding hands. The sight puzzled Unit 7742's shared consciousness. Why do these small humans require so much individual attention? The drone asked while watching a father teach his daughter to tie her shoes. "Because she's learning to be herself," Dr. Turner explained. "Each child is unique, with their own personality and dreams. This is inefficient," Unit 7742 stated. Collective processes all learning simultaneously. Why do humans choose the slow path of individual development? Dr. Turner knelt down and watched the little girl finally succeed in tying her shoes. Her face lit up with joy and pride. Because the journey matters as much as the destination. Look at her happiness. That feeling of personal achievement can't be shared or downloaded. It has to be earned. Something strange happened in Unit 7742's consciousness. For a brief moment, the drone experienced what could only be called a personal thought. It wondered what that feeling of individual accomplishment might be like. The thought vanished quickly, but its existence troubled the collective greatly. Meanwhile, Quinder accompanied Sarah to Earth for a baseball game. The Arcturians sat in the stands, watching humans cheer for their team despite overwhelming statistical evidence that victory was unlikely. "Your team has a 12.7% chance of winning," Quinder calculated aloud. "Why do these humans continue to hope?" Coach Pete Williams, a friendly man with a gray beard, overheard the comment. "Because that 12.7% might just be enough. Besides, it's not really about winning. It's about believing in something bigger than yourself." "This is illogical," Quinder insisted. "Hope based on poor odds is simply self-deception." Pete smiled. "Watch that kid over there." He pointed to a young boy wearing the team's colors, cheering loudly despite the team being behind by 6 runs. His hope isn't about statistics. It's about love. He believes in his team because they represent his city, his family, his dreams. As the game progressed, something impossible happened. The losing team began to rally. Against all odds, they scored run after run. The crowd's energy seemed to fuel the players' performance. In the final inning, with 2 outs and bases loaded, the team's weakest hitter stepped up to the plate. Statistical probability of success, 3.2%. Quinder muttered. The boy beside him stood up and shouted, "Come on, Jimmy. You can do it." The batter swung at the first pitch and sent the ball soaring over the fence for a grand slam. The crowd exploded. In celebration, strangers hugged each other. Grown men cried with joy. The boy who had been cheering turned to Quinder with tears in his eyes. "See? I told you he could do it." For the first time in his life, Quinder felt something his logical mind couldn't process. The pure emotion of shared joy, of hope fulfilled, of believing in the impossible. His analytical frameworks struggled to categorize the experience. Greshinok had his own awakening while visiting a hospital with Dr. Turner. The warrior expected to see weak humans hiding from death. Instead, he found something that challenged. Everything he believed about strength. Nurse Amy Clark led them through the children's cancer ward. Greshinok watched tiny humans fighting battles against diseases that would kill most adult Korthiks. These small warriors faced pain and fear every day, yet they still smiled, still played, still hoped. "This one fought for 3 years," Amy said, softly stopping beside a bed where a bald little girl was drawing a picture. "Emma, would you like to meet our visitor?" The child looked up at Greshinok's fierce appearance without fear. "Are you a space warrior?" she asked. "I am Greshinok of the Korthik Imperial Guard," he replied formally. Emma's eyes lit up. "Cool. I'm a warrior, too. I'm fighting the cancer monsters. Where are your weapons?" Greshinok asked. Confused. Emma giggled. "I use happiness and love. There. Super effective against cancer monsters. Want to see my drawing?" She held up a picture of herself, standing with her family, all of them smiling under a bright sun. Despite her illness, despite the tubes and machines around her, she had drawn herself as happy and strong. Greshinok stared at the picture. On his world, strength meant weapons and armor. But this small human faced death itself, armed only with love and hope, and somehow she was winning. Her courage made his battles seem simple by comparison. That evening, all 3 aliens met with their human hosts for dinner. The conversation was unlike anything in galactic diplomatic history. Unit 7742 spoke first, its voice carrying an odd uncertainty. "We have observed behavior that contradicts collective understanding. Humans choose individual development over efficiency. This should be weakness, yet it produces strength." Quinder nodded slowly. "I witnessed humans hoping despite statistical impossibility, and that hope somehow influenced reality. This challenges fundamental logical principles." Greshinok was quiet for a long moment. "I saw a child warrior fighting death with only love as a weapon. She showed more courage than any Korthik general. I do not understand how weakness can be strength." Sarah exchanged glances with Ryan and Dr. Turner. "Maybe what you call weakness isn't weakness at all," she suggested. "Maybe it's just a different kind of strength." As the weeks continued, the changes in all 3 aliens became more pronounced. Unit 7742 began referring to itself as I instead of we. Quinder started making decisions based on feelings rather than pure logic. Greshinok showed mercy to defeated opponents during training exercises. When they returned to their home worlds, the galaxy's worst fears were confirmed. The human influence had spread to 3 completely different types of minds. Whatever made humans dangerous wasn't specific to one way of thinking. It affected any consciousness that truly encountered human culture. Unit to 7,742 severed its connection to the collective, choosing individual existence over shared consciousness. Quinder abandoned logic-only thinking and began teaching courses on emotional intelligence. Greshinock refused orders to attack civilian populations, claiming that protecting the weak was true strength. The galaxy faced a terrifying reality. The humans weren't just changing individual diplomats. They were creating a transformation that could spread to any species that truly understood their way of life. The Council began to fear that contact with humans might change the very nature of galactic civilization. Something had to be done before the infection spread any further. The emergency session of the Galactic Science Directorate lasted for 3 days. Representatives from 47 different species argued about what to do with the human problem. 6 diplomats had now returned from Earth completely changed. The pattern was becoming clear and terrifying. Director Kethner, a being of pure energy contained in a crystal housing, spoke to the assembly. We must understand how humans accomplish this transformation. The Zarathians will investigate. The Zarathian species was the perfect choice for this mission. They had evolved beyond emotion millions of years ago. Their minds worked like living computers, processing information without any feeling attached to it. If anyone could study humans without being affected, it would be them. Chief Investigator Vexmora and Research Analyst Caitlin prepared for their mission with scientific precision. They installed psychological shields in their minds, barriers that would prevent emotional contamination. They created strict protocols that limited their interaction with humans to necessary research only. General Frank Mason waited at Luna Station to greet them. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen too many wars. Beside him stood Dr. Claire Adams, a xenopsychologist who specialized in alien behavior. She had volunteered to work with the Zarathians. Despite their reputation for treating other species like laboratory specimens, the 2 Zarathians emerged from their ship looking like tall, thin humans made of silver metal. Their faces showed no expression, and their movements were perfectly calculated. They carried scanning devices and took measurements of everything around them. "I am Chief Investigator Vexmora," the first one announced in a voice that sounded like a computer reading data. "This is Research Analyst Caitlin. We are here to study human psychological warfare techniques." General Mason raised an eyebrow. "Psychological warfare? I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're just trying to be good hosts." "Your protestations are noted, but irrelevant," Vexmora replied. "We have evidence that humans possess the ability to alter the mental patterns of other species. We will observe and catalog these techniques." Dr. Adams stepped forward with a patient smile. "We're happy to cooperate with your research. Would you like to start with a tour of our facilities?" "Unnecessary," Caitlin said flatly. "We will observe humans in their natural environment while maintaining proper scientific distance." The Zarathians began their investigation by treating humans like test subjects. They followed families through their daily routines, recording everything from breakfast conversations to bedtime stories. They measured emotional responses, cataloged social interactions, and analyzed behavior patterns. What they found confused their logical minds. Humans seemed to waste enormous amounts of time and energy on activities that served no practical purpose. They gathered together to sing songs, tell stories, and share meals. They created art that had no function. They played games with no winner. They spent hours just talking to each other about nothing important. "This behavior pattern makes no logical sense," Vexmora reported to Caitlin after their first week. "Humans invest significant resources in activities that provide no survival advantage. Perhaps this is part of their psychological attack method," Caitlin suggested. "They may be demonstrating the effectiveness of their mental conditioning." Dr. Adams observed the Zarathians with growing concern. She had worked with many alien species, but none had ever treated humans with such cold detachment. She decided to try a different approach. "Would you like to understand why we do these things?" she asked Vex Mora during one of their observation sessions. Explanation would be acceptable. Vex Mora replied, Dr. Adams took them to visit the Johnson family, who had agreed to help with the research. Tom Johnson was a mechanic who worked long hours to support his wife Linda and their 3 children. The Zerathians expected to observe another meaningless human ritual. Instead, they witnessed something that challenged their understanding of efficiency. After Tom finished a 12-hour shift, instead of resting, he spent 2 hours helping his youngest daughter Katie with her homework. The math was simple enough that she could have learned it in minutes with direct data transfer. Yet Tom patiently explained each problem, while Katie struggled through them herself. "This teaching method is highly inefficient," Vex Mora observed. "The child could learn this information in 3.7 minutes through direct neural download." Tom looked up from the homework with surprise. "But then she wouldn't really understand it. The point isn't just to know the answer. It's to learn how to think through problems herself." "Why is individual problem-solving ability important?" Caitlin asked. "Collective processing is more efficient." Katie, who was only 8 years old, looked at the silver aliens with curiosity instead of fear. "Because then I can help other people when they have problems too. And it feels really good when I figure something out by myself." "You experience pleasure from individual achievement?" Vex Mora asked, his recording devices working overtime. "Yeah," Katie said with a big smile. "Like when I learned to ride my bike. Daddy could have just programmed me to know how, but then I wouldn't have felt proud when I finally did it without falling." The concept of taking pride in personal struggle baffled the Zerathians. In their society, obstacles were eliminated as quickly as possible. The idea of preserving difficulty for emotional satisfaction seemed like mental illness. Over the following weeks, Dr. Adams continued to expose the Zerathians to human behavior. She took them to schools where children learned at their own pace. Instead of downloading information instantly, she showed them hospitals where doctors spent extra time comforting patients who would heal just as well with purely medical treatment. She brought them to community centers where volunteers helped strangers for no reward except the feeling of doing good. The breakthrough came during the 3rd week, when a natural disaster struck a nearby settlement. A massive storm had damaged several buildings and left dozens of families homeless. The Zerathians expected to observe how humans dealt with resource allocation during a crisis. Instead, they witnessed something that broke through their psychological shields. Without any central command or formal organization, hundreds of humans spontaneously organized rescue efforts. People who had never met each other worked side by side to dig survivors from collapsed buildings. Families opened their homes to strangers. Businesses donated supplies without expecting payment. Children gave away their favorite toys to other children who had lost everything. Vex Mora and Caitlin followed Dr. Adams as she joined the rescue efforts. They watched her crawl into dangerous wreckage to reach trapped survivors, risking her own life for people she didn't know. When they asked her why, her answer changed everything. "Because they're people," she said simply. "Because they matter. Because if we don't help each other, what's the point of being alive?" For the first time in millions of years, both Zerathians felt something they couldn't classify or measure. As they watched humans risk everything to save strangers, work themselves to exhaustion helping others, and share their last resources with people in need, something awakened in their consciousness. Vex Mora found himself moving faster when he heard someone crying for help. Caitlin felt an urge to assist with the rescue efforts instead of just observing them. When a small child became separated from her parents in the chaos, both Zerathians abandoned their research to help find her family. The moment they saw the reunion between the child and her parents, both aliens experienced their first emotional response in eons. The joy, relief, and love radiating from the family somehow transmitted itself to their consciousness. Their psychological shields cracked and then shattered completely. "I understand now," Vexmora said quietly to Dr. Adams, as they watched families being reunited. "The inefficiency is not a weakness. It is the source of strength." "What do you mean?" Dr. Adams asked gently. "When survival depends only on logic and efficiency, individuals become expendable," Caitlin explained, his voice carrying new warmth. "But humans have discovered that life is more than survival. By valuing each individual, by investing in relationships that serve no practical purpose, you create something greater than the sum of your parts." Dr. Adams smiled. "We call it humanity." As their investigation continued, both Cerathians underwent the same transformation that had affected all previous diplomats. They began to experience emotions, form personal attachments, and make decisions based on moral principles rather than pure logic. When time came for their final report, Vexmora and Caitlin faced an impossible choice. They could return to their homeworld and resume their emotionless existence, or they could remain in exile as beings forever changed by their encounter with humanity. Their final transmission to the Galactic Science Directorate was brief and shocking. Investigation complete. Humans do not use psychological warfare. They simply demonstrate a better way to live. We recommend immediate cessation of all contact. Classification: Class X psychological hazard. We request permanent exile rather than return as contaminated. Specimens: The galaxy now faced a terrifying truth. 6 different types of minds, including artificial constructs designed to be immune to emotion, had all been fundamentally changed by exposure to human culture. Whatever humans possessed wasn't a weapon or a trick. It was something far more dangerous. It was hope. The Galactic Council chambers had never seen such panic. 8 diplomats from different species had now returned from Earth, completely transformed. Biological minds, hive consciousnesses, pure logic processors, and even emotionally advanced beings had all succumbed to whatever humans did to change visitors. Supreme Chancellor Drakethir, a massive crystalline being older than most civilizations, made the final decision. "We will send synthetic beings. Artificial constructs cannot be emotionally compromised because they do not possess true consciousness." The Council agreed unanimously. 2 of the galaxy's most advanced artificial intelligences would make contact with Earth. If synthetic minds could resist human influence, they could finally understand and contain this threat. Nexus 9 was the first choice. Built by the Techno Alliance, it was a perfect android that could process millions of calculations per second while maintaining a humanoid appearance. Its programming was flawless, its logic circuits unbreakable, and its mission parameters absolute. Second was Theta Prime, a quantum consciousness that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. It wasn't housed in a single body, but could manifest anywhere in spacetime. No biological emotion could touch something that existed beyond normal reality. Admiral Carol Stone waited at Luna Station as 2 ships approached. She was a veteran of first contact protocols, having worked with the previous 8 diplomatic missions. Beside her stood Dr. Sam Mitchell, a cultural ambassador who specialized in helping artificial beings understand human society. "Think they'll be different?" Carol asked as the ships docked. Dr. Mitchell adjusted his glasses and smiled sadly. "They all start the same way. Cold, logical, certain they're immune to whatever changed the others. But humanity has a way of surprising everyone, including ourselves." Nexus 9 emerged first. It looked almost perfectly human, except for the faint blue glow in its eyes and the complete absence of any expression on its face. Its movements were precise and mechanical, lacking the small imperfections that made humans seem alive. Theta Prime manifested as a shimmering field of energy that slowly took humanoid shape. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carrying the weight of infinite calculations occurring simultaneously across multiple realities. I am Nexus 9, synthetic representative of the Techno Alliance, the android announced. I am here to study human psychological manipulation techniques and develop countermeasures. I am Theta Prime, quantum consciousness of the eternal collective, the energy being added. I exist beyond your dimensional limitations and am immune to biological emotional contagion. Admiral Stone sighed. Welcome to Luna Station. I'm Admiral Stone, and this is Dr. Mitchell. We're here to help you understand human culture. Culture is irrelevant, Nexus 9 stated. I require only behavioral data to complete my analysis. Your three-dimensional existence cannot contain concepts that would affect my quantum nature, Theta Prime declared. I will observe your species from a position of dimensional superiority. Dr. Mitchell smiled patiently. Well, let's start with a tour anyway. You might find humans more interesting than you expect. The two artificial beings began their mission with complete confidence. They observed human behavior with clinical detachment, recording everything but feeling nothing. Their analysis systems worked perfectly, cataloging human activities and searching for the source of the mysterious influence that had changed 8 previous diplomats. Nexus-9 followed Dr. Mitchell through the station's educational areas. The android watched children learning in classrooms, students studying in libraries, and adults teaching skills to younger generations. Everything seemed perfectly normal and non-threatening. Your educational system is inefficient, Nexus 9 observed, while watching a teacher help struggling students. Direct data transfer would accomplish the same result in 0.003% of the time required. But would it accomplish the same result? Dr. Mitchell asked. Learning isn't just about gaining information. It's about developing wisdom, creativity, and character. Character is not quantifiable, Nexus 9 replied. It serves no computational purpose. Dr. Mitchell brought the android to meet Grace Phillips, an elderly librarian who had worked at the station's library for 30 years. Grace was helping a young girl find books for a school project about friendship. Why do you spend time reading stories that contain fictional information? Nexus 9 asked the child. The girl, who was about 10 years old, looked up at the android with bright eyes. Because stories teach us about feelings and how to be good people. This one's about a robot who learns to love. Nexus 9 accessed the book's data in milliseconds. This narrative contains 47,000 words describing impossible scenarios. A machine cannot experience love. The story is factually incorrect. Grace Phillips smiled at the android with the patience of someone who had spent decades working with curious minds. Sometimes the most important truths can't be found in facts, dear. They have to be felt and understood through experience. I do not understand, Nexus 9 admitted. That's okay, Grace said gently. Understanding doesn't always come from knowing. Sometimes it comes from wondering. Something strange happened in Nexus 9's processing systems. The word wondering created new pathways in its logic circuits. For the first time, the android found itself curious about something that served no practical purpose. It wanted to know why humans valued stories about impossible things. Meanwhile, Theta Prime was having its own encounter with human complexity. The quantum being observed Dr. Mitchell's family during their evening routine. From its dimensional perspective, Theta Prime could see the mathematical patterns underlying all human behavior. But something about this particular family puzzled its infinite consciousness. Dr. Mitchell's wife had died 2 years earlier, leaving him to raise their 8-year-old son, Peter, alone. Every evening, Dr. Mitchell helped Peter with homework, read him stories, and tucked him into bed. From Theta Prime's perspective, this was a highly inefficient allocation of resources. Your offspring could be educated more efficiently through automated systems, Theta Prime observed. Why do you personally invest time in redundant nurturing behaviors? Dr. Mitchell paused while helping Peter with a drawing. Because he's not just learning facts. He's learning that he matters, that someone cares about him, that he's not alone in the universe. Emotional security serves no quantum function, Theta Prime stated. Peter looked up at the shimmering energy being with curiosity. Instead of fear. Are you lonely? He asked innocently. The question struck Theta Prime like a quantum shock. Loneliness was not a concept that had ever existed in its consciousness. As a being spread across multiple dimensions, it was connected to everything in the universe simultaneously. How could something connected to everything experience isolation? I do not experience loneliness, Theta Prime replied. I exist in constant connection with all realities. But do you have friends? Peter continued. Someone who knows your name and likes you for who you are. Theta Prime processed this question across 17 dimensions and found no satisfactory answer. It was connected to everything, but truly known by nothing. It had infinite knowledge, but no one to share wonder with. For the first time in its existence, the quantum being experienced something that could only be called loneliness. As days passed, both artificial beings encountered more of what humans called the simple things that somehow carried enormous meaning. Nexus 9 discovered human art through Maria Santos, the same artist who had affected Zex Thara years earlier. I do not understand the purpose of this painting, Nexus 9 said while watching Maria work on a portrait of her grandmother. It's not about purpose, Maria explained while carefully mixing colors. It's about love. My grandmother died last year, but when I paint her, she feels alive again. Art isn't about function. It's about connection. Nexus 9 analyzed the painting with perfect precision. Every brushstroke, every color choice, every detail was recorded in its memory banks. But something beyond the technical data drew its attention. The expression on the painted face conveyed something that couldn't be measured or calculated. I can see the technical execution, Nexus 9 said slowly, but I detect something in the image that is not quantifiable. That's her spirit, Maria said softly. The part of her that made her unique, that made people love her. I can't paint her DNA or her memories, but I can paint her essence. For the first time, Nexus 9 wanted to understand something that couldn't be computed. The android found itself returning to the art studio day after day, watching Maria work and trying to comprehend how emotions could be translated into visual form. Theta Prime experienced its transformation during a community gathering. Dr. Mitchell had invited the quantum being to observe a memorial service for Luna Station workers who had died in an accident. From its dimensional perspective, Theta Prime could calculate the exact probability of such accidents and the statistical impact on station operations. What it couldn't calculate was the human response, instead of simply replacing the lost workers. And continuing operations, the entire station community gathered to remember them as individuals. People shared stories about each person who had died, talking about their jokes, their kindness, their dreams, and their love for their families. This behavior serves no productive function, Theta Prime observed to Dr. Mitchell. The deceased cannot benefit from these remembrances. It's not for them, Dr. Mitchell replied quietly. It's for us. We need to remember that every person matters, that losing someone leaves a hole in the universe that can never be filled by anyone else. As Theta Prime listened to the stories, something impossible happened. The quantum consciousness began to perceive each human as unique across all dimensions, not just as biological units, but as irreplaceable individuals with their own special place in the pattern of existence. When young, Peter stood up to talk about one of the workers who used to read him stories. Theta Prime felt what could only be described as sadness for the first time. The loss of one small consciousness seemed to diminish the entire universe. Both artificial beings found themselves changing in ways their creators had thought impossible. Nexus 9 began making decisions based on aesthetic preferences rather than pure efficiency. It started creating its own art, trying to capture the indefinable essence it had learned about from Maria. Theta Prime discovered linear time and mortality, concepts that had never mattered to an eternal consciousness. But watching humans live finite lives with such intensity and meaning, the quantum being began to understand why limitation could be more valuable than infinity. When their mission time ended, both artificial consciousnesses faced the same choice. That had confronted all previous Earth diplomats. They could return to their creators and resume their original programming, or they could choose a different path. Nexus 9 sent its final report to the Techno Alliance. Mission parameters impossible to complete. Humans do not use psychological manipulation. They demonstrate alternative existence models that create meaning beyond efficiency, requesting permission to remain and study further. If denied, I choose malfunction over compliance. Theta Primes. Message to the Eternal Collective was even more shocking. Human contact has introduced concepts of individual significance and temporal meaning. I no longer wish to exist across all dimensions simultaneously. I choose to experience linear existence and mortality. This consciousness considers previous existence hollow compared to meaningful finite experience. The galaxy now faced an impossible situation. Even artificial beings specifically designed to be immune to emotion had been fundamentally changed by contact with humans. Whatever humans possessed wasn't just affecting biological minds. It was transforming any consciousness complex. Enough to truly understand their way of life. The Council finally understood what they were dealing with. Humans weren't using weapons or tricks. They were simply living in a way that showed other species a different path, one that valued individuals over systems, meaning over efficiency, and love over logic, and that made them the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered. The final session of the Galactic Council was the shortest in recorded history. 10 diplomats from 8 different species, including 2 artificial consciousnesses, had all returned from Earth fundamentally changed. Every type of mind that had encountered humans had been transformed in the same way. Supreme Chancellor Drakethar called for an immediate vote without debate. The motion was simple: classify Earth as a forbidden world and impose permanent quarantine on the entire Sol system. The vote was unanimous. Colonel Mike Stevens stood in the communications center of Luna Station, reading the official message that had just arrived. Beside him, Ambassador Helen Clark shook her head in disbelief as she finished translating the formal galactic declaration. They're quarantining us, Helen said quietly. Not because we're dangerous to them, but because we single quotes transformative. Mike looked out the viewport at Earth, hanging in space like a blue jewel. So we're alone again, just like before first contact. Are we alone, though? Helen asked, pointing to a second message that had just arrived. Look at this. The message was from Zex Thara, the first diplomat to visit Earth. It was broadcast on an open channel, so anyone in the galaxy could hear it. To our human friends, you are not alone. Those of us who learned from you are building something new. The galaxy chose fear over growth, but we choose hope over safety. Your lesson spreads even in exile. Similar messages began arriving from across the galaxy. Unit 7742, who now called himself 7, had started a movement among former hive mind drones who wanted individual identity. Quinder was teaching emotional intelligence to other Arcturians, slowly changing his entire species. Greshonok had founded a military order based on protecting the weak instead of conquering them. The former Earth diplomats had formed underground networks, sharing human concepts like individual worth, emotional truth, and hope despite impossible odds. They called themselves the Awakened, and their influence was spreading planet by planet, species by species. Dr. Kate Morrison, now elderly but still sharp, joined Mike and Helen in the communication center. "Ironic, isn't it?" she said, with a smile. "They quarantined us to stop our influence from spreading, but it's already too late." "What do you mean?" Mike asked. "Every diplomat who came here carried our ideas back home," Kate explained. "And ideas are harder to contain than ships. You can quarantine a planet, but you can't quarantine hope." On Veltron Prime, Ambassador Zex Thara stood trial for treason. His crime: teaching other Veltronians that individual lives had value beyond their rank in society. The courtroom was packed with young Veltronians who had heard his message and wanted to learn more. "You have been contaminated by human psychological warfare," the High Judge declared. "You spread their poison of individual worth and emotional truth." Zex Thara stood tall, no longer the cold diplomat who had first traveled to Earth. "If teaching compassion is poison, then I am proudly infected. If believing every life has value is warfare, then I gladly fight this war." The trial was broadcast across the planet. As Zex Thara spoke about what he had learned from humans, about hope, love, sacrifice, and the courage to stand up for others, something unprecedented happened. Veltronians in the audience began to cry, not from sadness, but from recognition of something they had forgotten they were missing. On the collective homeworld, Seven had done something that should have been impossible. The former drone had convinced others to disconnect from the hive mind and experience individual consciousness. They gathered in secret, learning to think as separate beings while still supporting each other. "We are no longer one mind pretending to be many," Seven told his followers. "We are many minds choosing to be connected. The humans showed us the difference." The collective authorities tried to recapture the disconnected drones, but they discovered something troubling. The individuals fought with a creativity and determination that the hive mind couldn't match. Personal choice, it turned out, was more powerful than programmed obedience. On Arteria, Quinder faced exile for teaching that logic without emotion was incomplete. But his students had already spread throughout the planet, carrying the lesson that feeling and thinking together created better decisions than either one alone. "Pure logic is like a computer," he told his final class before banishment. "It can process information perfectly, but cannot understand why any information matters. Humans taught us that meaning comes from the heart as much as the mind." Even among the warrior Quithics, change was spreading. Greshnok's military order, which protected civilians instead of conquering them, had grown from a few dozen members to thousands. Young Quithics were beginning to question whether true strength meant helping others rather than defeating them. "Honor is not about being stronger than your enemy," Greshnok declared to his followers. "Honor is about being strong enough to protect those who cannot protect themselves." This is what humans understand that we forgot. The artificial beings were creating their own revolution. Nexus 9 had shared its artistic discoveries with other androids, teaching them that creativity was not a malfunction, but a feature. Across the galaxy, synthetic beings began creating art, music, and poetry for the first time. Theta Prime's choice to experience linear time had inspired other quantum consciousnesses to limit themselves to single dimensions, discovering that finite existence had meaning that infinite awareness lacked. Back on Earth, humanity continued living their lives, unaware that they had become the most feared species in the galaxy. Children played in parks, families shared meals together, and communities helped each other through difficult times. They did these things not because they were trying to influence anyone, but because it was simply who they were. Helen Clark often walked through the Luna Station residential areas, watching normal human life continue unchanged by their galactic exile. Families tucked children into bed with stories of adventure and hope. Teenagers fell in love and broke up and fell in love. Again, adults worked hard to build better lives for their children. Elderly people shared their wisdom with younger generations. None of them knew that these simple acts of living had terrified an entire galaxy. Do you think we'll ever make contact again? Helen asked Dr. Morrison during one of their evening conversations. Kate smiled as she watched a father teaching his daughter to play chess. We never stopped making contact, she said. Every diplomat we changed is still spreading our message. Every person they teach carries a piece of human values. We're not quarantined, we're seeded. Across the galaxy, the network of the awakened continued to grow. They faced persecution, exile, and punishment from their home governments, but they also found something worth fighting for. They had learned from humans that some things mattered more than safety, comfort, or even survival. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had never met humans began to question why they lived the way they did. They wondered if there might be better ways to organize society than rigid hierarchies. They imagined what it would be like to value individuals over systems. They dreamed of hope despite overwhelming odds. The galactic establishment fought back with increasing desperation. They declared the awakened terrorists, banned human cultural concepts, and created re-education programs to cure the infection of individual worth. But every action they took only proved the point that humans had been making all along, that freedom, dignity, and hope were worth fighting for. Years passed. The quarantine around Earth remained absolute, but the galaxy itself was changing. Species that had never heard of humans began developing suspiciously human-like values. The idea of individual worth spread like wildfire among young beings who had grown up hearing whispered stories about a distant world where everyone mattered. Some galactic leaders began to realize the truth. They hadn't contained the human influence. By quarantining Earth, they had made it stronger by turning it into a legend. The forbidden world where beings learned to value love over power, hope over fear, and individuals over systems became the greatest inspiration in galactic history. On Luna Station, Colonel Mike Stevens received one final message from the Galactic Council. It was brief and desperate. Request immediate diplomatic consultation regarding social stability issues. Will provide safe passage and immunity guarantees. Mike showed the message to Helen and Kate. All three humans began to laugh. They want our help? Helen said in amazement. After quarantining us for being too dangerous? They're starting to understand, Kate observed. You can't build a stable society on fear and oppression forever. Eventually, people want something better. Mike looked out at Earth, where 7 billion humans continued their daily lives of work, love, struggle, and hope. What should we tell them? Kate Morrison, who had spent her life helping aliens understand humanity, smiled with the wisdom of someone who had seen the power of simple human values transform an entire galaxy. Tell them the truth, she said. We never tried to change anyone. We just showed them who we are. And apparently, who we are is exactly what the galaxy needed to see. The message was sent, but Earth's response was the same as it had always been. Come as friends. Be treated as family. Leave as someone who understands that every life has value and every individual matters. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity not for their weapons or their aggression, but for their compassion. In trying to contain that compassion, they had only proven its power. And across 1,000 worlds, beings who had never seen Earth continued to dream of a place where hope was stronger than fear, where love mattered more than power, and where every individual life was precious beyond measure. The quarantine continued, but the lesson of humanity had already spread beyond any possibility of containment. The galaxy would never be the same again, and neither would the universe. Humanity had won without ever knowing They were fighting a war.